It was supposed to be a standard operation. At 5 a.m., a team of elite agents closed in on a quiet suburban home, armed, trained, and certain of their target. But as the door crashed open, they found no threat. No resistance. Only silence, and an old man with eyes that had seen too much. What they didn't realize was that they had just unmasked a ghost. Not a myth. Not a rumor. But a man long buried by the very system he once served. A man they were never meant to find. The mission was supposed to be routine, just another line in the daily operations of a federal tactical team. At exactly 5 a.m., under the pale blue hue of dawn, black SUVs rolled silently into a quiet suburban neighborhood, their engines humming like a warning. Officers moved with precision, their boots crunching softly on dew-covered grass as they surrounded the modest, ivy-covered home. Their intel was clear: this address belonged to a dangerous suspect, someone the agency had quietly flagged as a potential national threat. Every man had their weapon drawn, hearts steady but alert, breaths synchronized like clockwork. They breached the door with a single bang, expecting chaos, screams, movement, maybe a shootout. But instead, they stepped into silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you like fog. The living room was tidy, the air filled with the faint aroma of jasmine tea. And there, seated at the kitchen table under a flickering yellow light, was an elderly man in a simple wool sweater, hands gently cradling a porcelain cup. He didn't flinch. Didn't run. Just looked up at them with calm, unreadable eyes, as if he had known this day would come, and had long since accepted it. Agent Turner, the squad leader, hesitated. His grip on the rifle tightened. Something felt wrong, off. The man wasn't listed on any government record. No passport. No driver's license. Not even a trace of a birth certificate. Turner activated his mic, speaking into his shoulder radio with practiced calm. "We've made contact. Sending a live image now." A moment passed. Then another. The line went dead silent. Static. And then, through the headset, a voice emerged, sharper, colder than before. "Stand down. Do not engage. Leave the premises. Immediately." That was the moment Turner felt it, that sinking weight in his gut. The sense that they hadn't found the suspect. They had stepped into something far bigger. Agent Turner stood frozen in place, his breath caught somewhere between instinct and uncertainty. The static in his earpiece had faded, but the words from command, "Stand down, Agent," kept looping in his mind like an echo trapped in a tunnel. It was the kind of order that didn't make sense in the moment. His grip tightened on the rifle slung across his chest, the weight of his training clashing against the silence that had fallen over the room like a heavy curtain. His team behind him shifted uneasily, each operative glancing toward him for direction. Their eyes said everything: they trusted him, but they didn't understand. Neither did he. This mission had been straightforward: sweep the abandoned property, clear out any remaining squatters or threats. But this? One old man, seated calmly in the center of the room, unarmed, unmoving, unafraid. Turner had faced drug lords, armed fugitives, and domestic terrorists. And yet, something about this man set off alarms deeper than logic, an instinctual dread that tightened in his chest with every passing second. He took a slow step forward, his boots creaking against the wooden floor. "Sir," he called out, voice low, measured. "I need you to stand up slowly, hands where I can see them." The old man didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted one weathered hand, not in threat, not in surrender, but like a father calming a frightened child. His eyes, sharp and steady beneath a furrowed brow, locked onto Turner's with a quiet intensity. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice smooth like worn stone, resonating with something deeper than words. Not yet. The words struck Turner harder than any bullet. They weren't a warning. They were a truth, unshakable, surreal, and chilling. Around them, the air grew inexplicably cold. A draft curled through the room, whispering through cracks in the walls and lifting the dust like breath. Outside, the wind picked up, leaves flailing against the glass like desperate hands. Turner hesitated. His finger hovered near the trigger, not out of threat, but as if to anchor himself. His heart pounded, not from fear of what the man might do, but from the gnawing sense that nothing about this situation was natural. He glanced at his team again, and for the first time, saw uncertainty in their eyes. They felt it too. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And as Turner locked eyes with the old man again, a single question rose in his mind, louder than the silence around them. What kind of man makes the government whisper in fear? The air in the small, dimly lit room grew heavier with each passing second, and Turner could feel his pulse quicken. His eyes remained fixed on the old man, whose unwavering stare felt as though it was slowly stripping away the layers of control Turner had so carefully built over the years. The team behind him remained silent, their movements stiff and hesitant, as if they too sensed the shift in the atmosphere. They had expected an easy capture, quick, efficient, over in minutes. But now, the very presence of the old man seemed to challenge everything they knew about power, authority, and control. Turner felt an unease creeping up his spine, a tightening in his chest. He had seen countless dangerous individuals in his career, some far more violent, some far more unpredictable. But this man? There was something about him that defied reason, something in his demeanor that stirred an unfamiliar anxiety in Turner's gut. The old man had a stillness, an unsettling calmness that filled the room like a dense fog. His gaze locked with Turner's, unblinking, as if daring him to make the first move. The old man's face, weathered by time and hardship, showed no signs of fear, only quiet defiance. His lips barely moved when he spoke, but each word seemed to carry the weight of 100 untold stories. "You think you're in control, don't you?" The old man's voice was low, but it rang out clearly in the silence, each syllable cutting through Turner's thoughts. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though he could see straight through the young agent standing before him. "You think you hold the power because you wear that uniform, because you carry that gun. But power isn't in the things you wear, or the weapons you hold. It's in what you know, what you can see, and what you're willing to face." Turner's heart thudded in his chest, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of doubt ripple through him. The old man wasn't just speaking to him, he was speaking through him, as if the words were meant to reach into the deepest part of his psyche. Turner tried to shake off the feeling, focusing on the mission, on the necessity of capturing this man. But it was hard to ignore the unsettling truth in those words, a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to confront. The old man sat back in his chair, a faint, knowing smile playing at the edges of his lips. His body language was relaxed, almost too relaxed for someone who was surrounded by armed agents. It was as if he knew that no matter what happened, he had already won the battle, if not physically, then mentally. The contrast between his calm demeanor and the tension in the room felt like a cruel joke. Turner's breath caught in his throat as the old man's eyes shifted, momentarily glancing at each of the agents in the room, studying them like specimens in a lab. The team's collective discomfort grew more palpable by the second. They were no longer just facing a fugitive, they were facing something far more complex, far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The feeling was almost suffocating, a sense of being trapped, like a rabbit cornered by a predator that knew exactly when to strike. "You're here because they sent you," the old man continued, his voice low and deliberate, his words wrapping around Turner like chains. "But don't kid yourself. You're not looking for me. You're looking for something else, something far more dangerous. And when you find it, you won't be able to walk away. None of you will. The words hung in the air like a dark promise. Turner's hands trembled, the rifle in his grasp feeling heavier than it had ever been before. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what the old man was implying. He couldn't allow himself to be swayed, couldn't let the uncertainty creep in. But as the silence stretched between them, Turner could feel the weight of the old man's gaze growing more intense, more suffocating. He tried to steady himself, but his voice faltered when he finally spoke. "Who are you?" The question felt small, insignificant in the face of everything he was now grappling with. It was a simple question, yet the answer, whatever it was, seemed to hold the power to shatter everything Turner thought he knew. The old man's smile deepened, but there was no humor in it. It was a smile born of experience, of knowing things that could never be forgotten. "I'm someone who's seen it all," he said quietly. "Someone who's lived through the wars you'll never read about, the battles fought in the shadows where no one can see. You think you're chasing a ghost, but in truth, it's you who's being hunted. And when you finally understand who the real enemy is, it will be too late." Turner's heart raced. The words, so cryptic and ominous, rattled him to the core. His instincts screamed at him to maintain control, to take command of the situation, but deep down, he knew that he was losing his grip on the narrative. The old man was right about one thing: this wasn't about power. It was about something deeper, something hidden in the cracks of the world. And no matter how hard he tried to hold on, it was slipping away from him. Turner could feel his pulse quicken as the old man's cryptic words hung in the air, thick with an undeniable tension. His grip on the rifle tightened, the metal cold against his skin, but it was as if the weapon had become an extension of his own hand, a lifeline in the storm of confusion swirling around him. Every instinct screamed for action, for certainty, for resolution. Yet, in this moment, all his training, all the years spent in the field, seemed to slip away. He was no longer an agent on a mission, he was a man standing at the edge of something larger than himself, something he didn't understand. The old man's eyes, like two deep pools of ancient knowledge, stared unflinchingly at Turner, and in that gaze, Turner felt a flicker of unease, no, something deeper, a whisper of doubt he couldn't shake. For the first time, he was unsure. Unsure of what this man knew, unsure of how to respond to the quiet intensity that radiated from him like a weight Turner could almost physically feel on his chest. "Enough games," Turner muttered, his voice rough with frustration. He stepped forward, his boots scraping against the floor in a deliberate, measured way that betrayed none of the inner turmoil roiling inside him. He wasn't just facing an old man now, he was confronting a riddle, an enigma. His training had always prepared him for criminals, for hostile confrontations. But this was something else entirely. "You've made your point. Now we do this the easy way, or the hard way. But either way, you're coming with us." The old man didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply watched Turner, almost waiting. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, as though he were savoring the very discomfort that was causing Turner's anxiety to spiral. "Easy?" The old man's voice cracked the silence, carrying a soft, dry rasp that seemed to make the air even colder. "You think there's an easy way out of this? You think you're in control?" Turner felt the words slice through him, sharper than any knife. Control. He was supposed to be in control. He was the one in charge of this operation, the one calling the shots. But with each passing second, the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift, and with it, his certainty. The walls of the room felt closer now, pressing in on him, suffocating him in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the tension in the air. It was something else, something intangible, but he felt it in the pit of his stomach. For a moment, his mind wandered. He glanced at his team, agents who had worked alongside him, trusted him, each one waiting for a sign, a command. They had followed him through dangerous situations, had trusted his lead without question. But right now, they were watching him, waiting for him to make the call. The pressure weighed heavily on him. He had led them into situations that tested their mettle, but this was different. This wasn't just about muscle or firepower. This was about something deeper. Something hidden beneath the surface. And it was starting to gnaw at him. The old man, sensing his hesitation, leaned forward slightly, the movement so slow, so deliberate, that it was almost as if he were savoring the moment. His eyes never left Turner's. "You still don't get it, do you?" His voice was low now, barely above a whisper, but the weight of his words was undeniable. "You're not in control. You never have been. You're just a pawn in a much larger game. A game that's already in motion." Turner's breath caught in his throat. The words seemed to pulse in the air between them, reverberating through his mind. A pawn. He was supposed to be the one orchestrating this, not being manipulated by it. And yet, the old man's words struck too close to home. Was it possible? Was he part of something he didn't understand? The thought was like a fist to his gut, and he took an involuntary step back, suddenly unsure of everything he had believed in. "Shut up," Turner snapped, his voice rising with an edge of desperation. His mind scrambled for answers, for something solid to hold on to, but the more he fought against the dissonance inside him, the more his confidence seemed to crumble. "Enough with the riddles. You're under arrest." The old man's smile widened, but it wasn't one of fear or regret. It was knowing, too knowing. It made Turner's skin crawl. "You can arrest me all you want, Agent," he said with a chuckle that sent a chill down Turner's spine. "But it won't change a thing. The pieces are already in place, and you're just too late to stop it." "Shut up," Turner repeated, more forcefully this time, his heart hammering in his chest. He had to regain control. He had to stop this madness before it unraveled any further. His eyes flicked to his team again, who were still frozen in place, their expressions betraying their unease. They were all waiting for him, he couldn't let them down. Not now. He took another step toward the old man, his boots louder now, a declaration of his resolve. "We're taking you in. Now." But before he could move, there was a sharp sound, a faint clink from somewhere behind him. It was soft, so subtle that it might have been easily ignored. But Turner's instincts screamed at him to react. His body went rigid as he whipped around, scanning the room. Every muscle in his body tensed, his rifle raising instinctively, ready to face any threat. But there was nothing, just empty shadows in the corners, the far door creaking ever so slightly as if it had been moved. "Agent Turner," the old man's voice sliced through the stillness, a soft whisper that seemed to carry a weight beyond his words. "It's already begun. You've already lost." Turner's heart skipped a beat. His hands, once steady and unwavering, trembled slightly as he held his rifle. The old man's eyes gleamed with something darker, something that made Turner feel like a child, caught in the dark without a light to guide him. And in that moment, Turner felt the world shift again, this time more violently. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And he had no idea what it was. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway now, rapid and unmistakable. The game had changed. And Turner, despite all his years of training, despite all his experience, couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. The air felt heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that pressed against Turner's chest. Every breath he took seemed louder than the last, every movement slower, as though the weight of the situation was dragging him under. His fingers twitched around the grip of his rifle, his knuckles now white from the pressure. He had trained for this moment, prepared for every scenario, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The old man, sitting motionless in the dim light, remained eerily calm. Turner's eyes darted between him and the shadows that loomed just beyond the far wall. He could hear the footsteps now, slow, deliberate, like a countdown to something inevitable. The sound echoed down the narrow hallway, a rhythmic tapping that sent a chill down Turner's spine. Turner's pulse quickened, his heart hammering in his chest as the seconds seemed to stretch out into eternity. Was this really happening? Was he really about to walk into a trap of his own making? He shook his head slightly, trying to dismiss the thoughts, trying to focus on the task at hand. But the weight of the decision was suffocating. He had been so sure, so confident just moments ago, but now the doubt was creeping in, gnawing at him with every breath. What if he had made a mistake? What if he was walking into something he couldn't control? The old man's voice broke the silence, a low murmur that seemed to carry through the room with an unsettling finality. You think you're in control, Agent Turner? You think this is just another mission, another notch on your belt? But you're wrong. His words were like a slow poison, sinking into Turner's thoughts, poisoning the clarity he had clung to. The truth is, you're out of your depth. You've been chasing something for so long, you've forgotten why you started. It's too late to turn back now. Turner's grip tightened around the rifle, his jaw clenching, the words hitting him harder than expected. They stung, not because they were true, but because they struck a nerve he had buried deep inside for years. It was the same feeling he had every time he looked in the mirror, the feeling that, despite all his training, all his successes, he was still just another pawn in a much larger game. Was he truly making a difference, or was he just following orders, lost in a web of manipulation? But there was no time for these doubts. The footsteps were closer now, and Turner's instincts screamed at him to act, to stay focused. He couldn't let the old man get under his skin. He couldn't let the doubt win. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. The air seemed to grow colder, the shadows darker. Turner's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, each one fighting for control. He had a job to do. The mission had to succeed. No matter what. The old man remained calm, almost too calm. His eyes locked with Turner's, as if he could see every fragment of uncertainty swirling in the younger agent's mind. There was something unnerving in the way he sat there, unbothered, as if he already knew how this would end. Turner's fingers twitched again, his body bracing for the inevitable confrontation. His training told him to be ready for anything, but his gut told him this was different. And then, just as the silence reached its peak, the door burst open, the sharp sound of boots on concrete cutting through the tension like a knife. The agents who stormed in were not the familiar faces Turner had expected. These were strangers, their faces unreadable, their movements too precise. They moved as one, like a well-oiled machine, and Turner realized, with growing dread, that they weren't here to support him. They were here to take control. The agent in front, tall and imposing, stepped forward without a word. His eyes never left Turner's, and in that moment, Turner understood. He wasn't in charge anymore. He hadn't been for a long time. Agent Turner, the agent said, his voice cold and flat, I'm afraid you've lost your position. Step aside. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Turner's stomach dropped, his mind racing to make sense of it. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. He had been in control. He had been the one making the calls. How had it all gone so wrong? His heart pounded in his chest, a sharp, rapid rhythm that matched the sudden panic coursing through his veins. The agents who had entered didn't even flinch at his rifle. They were calm, unfazed, like they knew everything already, like they were waiting for him to make his move. But Turner couldn't move. His body felt rooted to the spot, frozen by the realization that the game had changed. And he hadn't even seen it coming. His mind screamed at him to act, to take charge, to fight back. But his legs wouldn't move. His fingers, once so sure and steady, now trembled around the rifle's grip. He couldn't let this happen. Not like this. He had worked too hard, fought too much, to let it slip away. But what could he do? What was left for him to fight with? "Who are you?" Turner forced out, his voice hoarse, his throat tight with disbelief. The agent smiled, a thin, unsettling expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Who we are doesn't matter. What matters is that your mission is over, Turner. You were never meant to win." It was like the ground had been ripped from under his feet. Turner's breath caught in his chest. The truth, bitter, cold, and cutting, was staring him in the face. He wasn't the one in control. He wasn't the one with the power. And now, there was nothing left but to accept that. The agent's eyes never left his, and Turner knew. It was over. But the question lingered in his mind like a knife twisting deeper into his gut. How had he missed the signs? How had he been so blind? He was no longer an agent. He was just another pawn in someone else's game. When the mission was called off with a single command, confusion turned to fear. "Stand down. Do not engage." 5 words that no one questioned, because everyone knew what they meant. The man in that house wasn't just a target, he was a warning. A survivor of shadows, of secrets, of betrayals too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Now, the agents walk away. But none of them will forget what they saw. And somewhere in the quiet that follows, a question lingers. Who protects the protectors, when they become the hunted?